Hi, welcome to Relish Books. Today I was thinking about The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne and thinking about it in connection with the question of what is a classic and what elements really contribute to make a book a classic. And I thought The Scarlet Letter is kind of a perfect example. It's not too long of a book, it's not too short, it's pretty simple. It's a simple story. The elements of the story are basic but iconic. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that today. Why I think that book in particular has been passed down through the years as a classic, and why the elements in it are elements that lend themselves to be a classic. For one thing, it did stir people up a bit at the time. That's always helpful. The book was published in 1850, though it's set in the mid-1600s with the Massachusetts Bay Colony Puritan village atmosphere, and with this very strict set of rules. It's the story of how a society treats this woman who has been caught in adultery. She has a child out of wedlock. Well, not just out of wedlock, she's actually married and has a child with another man. And the story follows how she is an outcast because of this, while at the same time following the parallel of, she has her very public shaming, and then she has to wear this physical symbol that sets her apart from everyone. And so she suffers in this very public way, while the father, who she refused to expose, suffers in a very private way, and in a far worse way, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of the author, and kind of part of what he's trying to show in the story. But all in all, it's a simple story, very dramatically told. The elements of drama here are what make it memorable. The stark images of the story are what make it stand out in the memory. Images of the father up on the scaffold in the middle of the night during a lightning storm, crying out his guilt. The kind of blending of the spiritual world with the physical world, and the ideas that he's merging with his story in the physical manifestation of the man's guilt through, his inner anguish eventually manifesting itself in a physical way in his illness. These sharp images that stay with you even if you've forgotten particular elements of the story over time. It's been a few years since I've read this book, and yet still these vivid images stay with me. Hester and her lover in the forest, their passions finally just carrying them away after years and years of just living with this guilt. It feels so authentic. That's the thing. It's a simple story. It's wild and tumultuous in its imagery, and yet it also feels real. And I think, why this story caused some turmoil at the time was, even though it was published a few hundred years later, the society was still a little uncomfortable with the idea of an adulteress being like a main character and being sympathetically portrayed. Now, I think it's interesting that anyone would really have a problem with this. Maybe just they're shy of the subject matter of having to think about that in a story. Because while she is sympathetically portrayed, the book never ever excuses the sin of these two. It's never making out that what they did was okay. It's never making out that they were in the right or anything like that. It's clearly a sin. But there is the idea that the way that people reacted to the sin was maybe worse than the sin itself. And also, I don't know, kind of bringing out the irony of, or the hypocrisy of people, in acting like they don't have any sin. Just like a very Puritan society, acting like they don't have any sin and compared to this sin that's somehow above other sins. So there's all these things at play in the story, on top of that it is beautifully written. When I started the book, I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't really think that it was something I was going to be super interested in. The storyline, the idea had never really stood out to me from what I knew about it, and I was immediately drawn in because the writing is pristine in its quality, in its gripping power. You're drawn right in. I followed it with a vast interest. It's, like I said, it's simple and melodramatic at the same time, which is kind of an amazing mix. So I think that that's really what makes it a classic, and I think that that's what a classic truly is, right? It's a simple story told in a great way. That, to me, is the definition of a classic. Something simple, but so very fine. Like a good piece of jewelry, it's basic, but it's its quality that sets it apart. And I think that's what classics should truly be. That's why weird, wonky things, maybe that are, that have sparkle and interest, but don't have real quality, I think those things don't last. And for me, things like H.G. Wells's books shouldn't be classics, in my opinion. I know that's not my decision to make, obviously, but because there's no underlying true depth of quality coming through. They feel like odd scientific experiments with the element of the fantastic and the weird, without any real goodness underneath. Like, I'm fine with weird things, but there should be goodness underneath, and you feel that very much so in the Scarlet Letter, a real depth of quality in the writer. I'm not saying he's right about everything. I think some of his ideas that he puts forth in the book are erroneous, but definitely it will, when you're reading it, you feel like you're experiencing greatness, and that's what I love about it, and I think that's what many, many other readers have loved about it. This is actually the only Nathaniel Hawthorne book I've ever read. I know there's a few other titles that, particularly like The House of Seven Gables, that I probably should get to at some point because I think his writing is really good. But those are my thoughts today about the Scarlet Letter and how it fits into its place in the world of literature and how it's just such a great example of a classic and the elements that a classic ought to have. So, for what it's worth, thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.